What is up, everybody, and welcome to another TBRCon 2023 author reading, where I'm joined today by my friend Krystle Matar, author of Legacy of the Brightwash, this amazing book right here. And I'm very excited to hear a little bit from Legacy of Brick and Bone with you. But how are you doing, Krystle?
I'm doing good. I've been able to work, which has been amazing. So Brick and Bone is advancing well, finally. And that's the only thing that matters. And I have all my whiskey out, so there you go. I'm good.
That's all you need. All you need is all the whiskey in the back, and you're set.
Exactly.
Cool. Well, I just wanted to, before we get started, ask you a little bit about how it's been going in terms of, the writing process for Legacy of Brick and Bone, how things are going after SPFBO and all that. But first off, just let me know, like, how's life? How you been? How's writing going lately?
It's going really good. I have to admit that like the second book slump hit me really hard over the summer, and it was challenging to kind of grapple with who I wanted to be as a writer, and then what my priorities were for the next stories. But Michael Fletcher was amazing, and he did a beta read or whatever, an alpha read on the really awful draft that I had that I couldn't figure out. And talking to him, kind of like, it was like a light switch moment where it's like I was in the dark for a long time, and then just talking to him, it was like, oh yeah, okay, I know what I'm doing. I know what I want to say, and I know who I need to be for this story. And I'm just going to fucking do it. And then since he slogged through that incredible mess, and, he'd wake me up in the mornings at like 5 o'clock in the morning, and this is shit. You lost the pacing, and people are talking too much, and why are your boys crying? And it's like, yeah, this is nice. I really appreciate this, but thanks.
Yeah.
And it just, that ass kicking I needed to stop feeling sorry for myself and just get back to work. So it's going to be a better book thanks to him, but also it's probably going to be rougher thanks to him. So
yeah, I mean, shout out to Michael Fletcher.
Exactly.
He's a beautiful human being. He's probably going to hate me for blowing him a kiss, but fuck you, buddy. But it's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. But it's good to get like that harsh critique that you really need at the same time. And someone who's able to kind of like,
but also like,
get a vibe for what you're trying to go for as well. And kind of just be like,
he can
back to that.
He could see what I was trying to do. Like, he could see through the things that I was afraid to commit to and be like, no, just go for it. And also, I mean, he was giving me shit, but he was also very compassionate and very understanding on how, this stage of writing can really fuck with your head. And so, he gave me shit, but he also then picked me back up again. So, I mean, I owe him a lot. He's a great guy. He'll deny it, but it's true.
Oh, that's brilliant. And this new book, the second one that is kicking Krystle's, is Legacy of Brick and Bone, which is going to come out sometime in 2023, but I'm really, really excited for it. It's I was talking to Connor M. Kaplan recently, and he said, like, this book just like laid me out on my ass. And that sounds beautiful. I'm down for that. Krystle, you're twisted, but you're
I know I am.
Your storytelling is just getting better and better. Yeah.
I'm glad to hear it, because I flinched away from the twistedness, and it made it a worse book. So I'm going to double down instead, see if it makes it better.
Fuck yeah. Well, on top of that, like, how are you building on top of the world that you created? Because I'm going to show this map right here. This is the city of Yellowsmere, which is where Legacy of the Brightwash takes place. And then the Dominion, which is like the broader world, which I believe is based sort of on like Eastern Canada kind of thing, circa late 1800s kind of vibe.
Yeah, exactly.
So how are you building on not only the city, but also like the world around in this book?
So this one is kind of it's been a tricky middle ground, because I am expanding like the wider politics, in that Toshway is more aware of what's going on in the Dominion, but it's still pretty tight to Yalesmere. So the spoiler alert for the end of Brightwash is that Stella has left the city, and so we see her traveling across the wilderness, and that's where I've really enjoyed using wilderness that I am familiar with, and in this part of Canada, and
In the
bringing it into
boonies.
a fantasy world. Yeah, in the boonies. There's, a great shout out to Red Twig Dogwood that made it in, because that stuff's been the bane of my existence out in the boonies. But also just kind of like, I love science fiction and fantasy. But fantasy has that habit of being very, very British. And while the differences, at least for the wilderness, can be subtle, they're still there, and you still feel it when you're not included in a genre. And so it's been really fun just to pull all the Canadian influences in and just kind of let fantasy spill out over a different border. And I mean, we're still pretty white in this part of the world, but I tried to pull in also that multiculturalism that we see here. So hopefully a few more people feel a little bit seen. And then doing the wilderness stuff has been really fun. And it was something that I had to cut an awful lot of after Fletcher complained about the pacing. But I
can imagine him just being like, there's too much walking. This isn't Lord of the Rings, Krystle.
Almost exactly. It shouldn't be a happy stroll through the brush. You need to bring more danger or something like that. So yeah, there was too much walking and not enough blood. So there's more blood now. They walk the same amount, but I tell people less about it.
I appreciate that. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah.
And on that note, on Fletcher helping you out with this book and everything like that. And I know we've had conversations about like the self-pub community, but also SPFBO and everything that's sort of come with that. But now that you kind of have more time to have thought about that and to look at it in hindsight, how are you feeling about the self-pub community and your experience in SPFBO and how that is kind of helping you in your journey towards your sophomore release?
Yeah, well, I mean, definitely self-pub or SPFBO, you can feel the weight that it has, because when it ended and it shifted to the next year's entrance, you could almost immediately feel the room move on from you. So it's harder to notice when you're in the middle of it and while it's going on. But definitely it was a huge boost during year 7. And then as soon as people pivoted to year 8, as they should, I could feel it start. It's like, okay, now you're on your own and you have to keep up,
Your old news, Krystle.
Yeah. But at the same time, I'm still rolling. I'm still getting people interested because they heard about SPFBO last year. And so the thing about marketing is it's hard to identify any specific one thing that is affecting you, but you can see when you're blending things really well. And SPFBO is definitely one of those things where it elevates your visibility in a really crowded space. And then when I moved on to helping to judge for the next SPFBO, I was really happy to see it then go on to elevate other people who were coming up and brand new. And, people like Andrew Meredith, who he said he didn't have many connections in the community. And then all of a sudden he's got deep roots and a lot of friends. And so it's really nice to see that keep rolling forward for people who are kind of wandering into the room going, hey, does anybody want to read a book? And people are building some really great relationships. So I think for all that, it's scary and it's hard to make yourself that vulnerable.
Yeah.
it's worth it, because ultimately that's what publishing is, you know, putting your bleeding heart and soul onto a page and then asking people to read it and judge it, and maybe read the next one. And so SPFBO just like accelerates that feeling of, no, wait, stop. But it was worth it. It was definitely worth it.
Oh, I love that, because it's like beyond, you know, getting into the space and just shouting into the void and being like,
Yeah.
hey, like, check out my book. Even though, you know, people will kind of come back at you, not necessarily in an antagonistic way, but kind of with that thought of like, who are
Yeah.
you, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's cool to have that ability to enter into the space. I mean, I did it with podcasting. I didn't necessarily do it
Yeah.
with like SPFBO or SPSFC or anything like that, but it's the same thing. It's like getting to know
It is.
people, and sometimes it can just be a huge flood, but at the same time, it's like, you know, that's what this community is about. If you find
Yeah.
your space within this space, people will
Yeah.
show you appreciation and give you time of day, and you know,
Yeah.
eventually to the point where it's like, you know, you're getting alpha reads from Fletcher and all this kind of
Yeah.
stuff, which is great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That, I mean, I don't, how many years has it been now? I guess like 2.5 years ago, before, while I was getting ready to publish Brightwash, I would not have expected to launch myself into Fletcher's orbit almost immediately. I'm not sure exactly how I ended up in his orbit, but he read Brightwash.
Canadian whiskey.
I guess so. But I was a little bit less obvious about how much I drink at that point. I was still trying to be professional. um, but he read it almost immediately. I think he read it, you know, in March or April after it published. And
And
it was
then
just
they had you pretty quickly
like,
after that on Wizards, Wars, and Words too.
yeah, he was certainly not the first podcast I was on, but one of the first. He got me onto my first podcast, which was with Mike from Swords and Sports, who Fletcher was on to talk about one of his books, and he had just read Brightwash, and he said to Mike that I needed to be on Swords and Sports. And so yeah, it's weird. You'll be amazed the people that you find yourself next to, and that feeling of awe never really goes away.
Yeah, I feel the same
Really.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like even after, you know, a year and a bit of doing this podcast, it's like I'm still kind of, you know,
Yeah, and it's like every now and then I'll remember.
losing my shit in my head, just like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
talking with so and so, you know.
Every now and then I'll just remember the things that I've done. Like I've been on your podcast with fucking Anthony Ryan. You know, like, how did I get here? So yeah, it's that feeling does not go away.
Yeah, but it's a beautiful feeling. And we're gonna
Yeah.
shift into Legacy of Brick and Bone. If you could give a bit of a synopsis and then let us know which part of the book you're going to be reading.
Okay, so am I doing a synopsis of Brightwash or Brick and Bone?
You can give a synopsis. I'm assuming if anyone's listening, they're somewhat familiar with Brightwash, but maybe give a little bit of a touch on Brightwash and then lead into Legacy of Brick and Bone.
So so Brightwash, it kicks off with the thread of the murder mystery where Toshwe finds the girl and wants to know what happened to her and how she became so mutilated on the bank of the river, and it pulls him into the wider political field of a place that has used basically the bodies and the strength and the magical abilities of children to run their empire. And so, and their industrial revolution for that matter. And so it's kind of a slow dawning of horror in his story arc of what he's complicit in and also what he's contributed to as an officer of this authority. And so, however, he's not a man who makes good choices. He's a man who drinks when he's angry. And at the end of Brightwash, he's gotten his dumbass arrested for threatening the the chief administrator of the authority, who is responsible for all of the horrible things going on. And I end at a horrible cliffhanger, and most people who read the book hate me. But I had to end the book somewhere.
Mhm.
So I ended there. So what I'm going to do is, even though, so for Brick and Bone, I kind of pump the brakes and take a step back and show things that were happening while Toshway was fucking up his life. Because in Brick and Bone, Ishmael becomes a point of view character because he can bring context to the wider political scope. And so I've been threading through kind of what horrible mistakes he's been making while Toshway has been fucking up his life. I have a theme of guys and women who do really bad things under stressful situations. So the first chunk of Brick and Bone is catching up with Ishmael and what he's been doing, and then also following Stella after she leaves Brightwash, because there's a gap there of her leaving and then Toshway continuing his story. And so that's where all that wilderness stuff comes in. And then we cut back to Toshway's arrest and pick up steam from everything that happens as a result of that really bad choice. And so what I've picked, even though it lands a little bit later in the arc of Brick and Bone, is the continuation of that scene where the cliffhanger is. So obviously there's a lot of spoilers for Brightwash, and if you're still here and you haven't read that book, I don't know why you're here. Go read the book and then come back.
Yeah.
But that's where I'm at. We're at day 33, the day Toshway has been arrested and also getting into more trouble.
Because he's a little shithead. All right, cool. I'm going to show this cover one more time because it's beautiful. This isn't the final cover, but it's pretty close, as you've told me before.
I'm not sure how much will change. It's possible that nothing will change, but I'll have to reveal it before this day this airs. So maybe this is the cover reveal too.
That's your deadline. All right. Well, Krystle, take it away. I'll leave it to you.
Okay. So Toshway, day 33. Is all that shit true? Ishmael asked. The things you said to Raynor? Fucking hell, you're useless when you're drinking, aren't you? Toshway ran a hand over his face. I told General Wolf all of this already. I told you I wasn't working, Ishmael muttered, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a handful of dates. He offered some to Toshway, but Toshway waved them off. What are you going to do next? I'm going to find a way to prove it, Toshway muttered. He stood, but all the whiskey seemed to hit him in the face like a punch, making him sneeze weak. He sank back down, closing his eyes as the world tilted and spun. Easy there, Captain. Don't start puking or I'll fucking join you and all this whiskey will be wasted. Toshway sucked in a deep breath. How did I not know any of this? I worked for the authority for 19 fucking years, and I didn't know. I have to fix it. He ran both his hands over his face, trying to scrub away the slow, foggy feeling in his brain. Shit, they'd finished that bottle too damn fast. If I can find proof, maybe I can fix it. I can make it stop. Energy units, for fuck's sake. Toshway Blackwood. Toshway turned, looking over his shoulder. A half-dozen patrollers were standing behind him, clustered in close. A few of the younger ones had pale faces and the trembling hands of youths fearful of their first action, but the older ones had grim and unrelenting expressions. Shit, Toshway. Shit, Ishmael breathed. Toshway, don't fight it. No matter what they do, don't fight them or they'll kill you. Just do what they tell you. Something buzzed behind Toshway's ears, tension building in his muscles, crawling over his bones. Look at me, you bastard. I said don't fight it. Put your hands behind your head, Mr. Blackwood, the patroller said. You're under arrest for uttering threats against the chief administrator of the National Tainted Registration Authority. Jason. The thought struck him so hard, he needed a moment to catch his breath after. If he was arrested, and he had as much talent as Stella said, would he be processed to the Rift? The possibility drained all the anger out of him. Maybe he should have been afraid, but seeing Jason again, maybe together the pair of them could find a way to get out of that place. He could hold his son again. He could apologize for all the ways he'd been so wrong all these years. Don't do anything stupid, Ishmael said again. Toshwe lifted his hands slowly, lacing his fingers behind his head. Jason was worth it. Every other thought slithered through his mind too slowly and too far away, but that realization hit him with perfect clarity. He'd go to the rift with Jason and figure shit out from there. I'm not going to do anything stupid. Ishmael put his hands up too, but he twisted his body to show his palms to the patrollers. Toshwe fought against the urge to stand, to move. He hated it, sitting there, all those guns pointed at his back, all those nervous trigger fingers hovering, all that gunpowder waiting to do its job. But he'd been on the other side of a moment like this often enough to know that getting up now was a mistake. Someone would take it as a threat and he'd get shot. Just sit, just wait. It was worth it for Jason. He locked his eyes on the empty whiskey bottle, sitting in the shale by his feet, and Keogh's urn sitting beside him, water pooling in the bottom. All of Keogh's ashes were gone into the Brightwash. How fast did that water flow? Would our ashes make it all the way out to sea, or would they settle at the bottom of the river before that? That fucking urn had brought him to this moment, staring at it at the kitchen table, keeping company with it day and night, feeling the weight of its judgment and his failure. It had all driven him to drinking way too much, just to try to get away from it. But of course, escape was impossible. The whiskey just made him angrier, and now here he was. Patrollers, Captain Blackwood has a pistol and a large knife in the holster under his jacket, Ishmael said. I'm going to take them out and set them aside so there aren't any problems. How does that sound? A moment stretching, Toshwe's heartbeat pounded through his whole body. The river, the city, it all rose to an incredible roar that he was entirely too aware of. One of the patrollers shifted, whispered, "He's a big fucker. I hope we don't have to take him down." "Do it," another patroller said, slowly. Ishmael released a long breath, his shoulders relaxing a little. "Sit up straighter so I can reach, and don't do anything stupid." "You said that already," Toshwe said, straightening his back, taking a good, slow, deep breath and filling his lungs to bursting. The whiskey had a hold of him, making his head feel too light, making it feel like he was listing to one side. He flexed his shoulders, an ache settling in his muscles as he tried to keep his hands behind his head. Ishmael pulled the heavy Imberly pistol out first, his hands clumsy from all the whiskey, making him fumble it when it caught on Toshwe's coat. The gun that had killed Edgar Hale smashed a bullet through his skull and left him nothing but bleeding, oozing meat in his own apartment. How had Toshwe's life spun so hard and so fast out of control? That death had come too easily, like Toshwe had spent the last 19 years lying to himself about the kind of man he was. The army had made him a killer, and he tried to shave those sharp edges off himself, but they hadn't gone away like he thought. They were just covered until he needed to unsheath them again. And those edges had killed Hale, and they almost killed Raynor. "I know I said it already," Ishmael said, snapping Toshwe out of the wild twist in his thoughts. "But I really, really mean it. Don't do anything stupid. Don't get yourself killed. You're not allowed to die today, do you hear me?" "Yeah, Ishmael, sure, I'll try my best." Ishmael pulled the cavalry knife out next, tossing it away. The blade hit the loose shale of the river bank, sinking deep. The hilt stood straight up and pointed at the slate sky like a gravestone for Keogh's final resting place. "That's not good enough." Toshwe started to reach for Ishmael. He wanted to wrap his hands around Ishmael's body and crush him close and tell him that everything was going to be fine. Nothing felt fine, but he wanted to say it anyway and make it true. The half-restrained panic in Ishmael's voice took him by surprise, and he wanted to tell Ishmael that he'd be fine in the rift with Jason, but the words didn't come soon enough. "Keep your hands behind your head," the patroller snapped. "Yeah, all right," Toshwe said, lacing his fingers together tighter. He must have moved more than he realized. "Of course." "You too," another patroller grunted. "What?" Ishmael scoffed. "I'm fucking helping you here." Ishmael Saidi? No, Ishmael said, the word coming so fast it must have been a drunken reflex. Ishmael Kolkara. Put your fucking hands behind your head. I told you, I'm not Ishmael Saidi. Ishmael put his hands behind his head anyway, lacing his fingers together and leaning forward away from the guns, bowing his head low between his knees. Isn't that the drunken idiot who makes watches? I've never met him. Just the unfortunate coincidence of the same first name. What the fuck are you arresting him for? Some small, sober part of Tashua's brain tried to tell him it wasn't time to fight, not with so many guns pointed at their backs. He didn't do anything, he said anyway, the words burning hot against the last shred of good sense. What am I under arrest for? Ishmael asked. Dominion legal code states that the arrested party has the right to know the nature of charges against them. You're under arrest for being fucking mouthy, the patroller grunted. Ishmael laughed, the sound too liquid and too wild. That's never been a crime in this country. The patroller put a foot on Ishmael's back and shoved him down, face first, into the riverbank. Patrollers grabbed Toshua too by the wrist, pulling it down behind his back to clamp the first manacle in place. Someone dropped down to grab Ishmael's wrists, earning a shout of pain from Ishmael that rattled straight through Toshua's skull. The rage snapped to life too fast, and Toshua couldn't think. The tension in his body forced him up to his feet, a step towards Ishmael. Hands grabbed him, but he thrashed away from them, his elbow catching someone, but he didn't even see who. Stop, Ishmael shouted, his head in the gravel so he could look, turning his head in the gravel so he could look Toshua in the eye. Don't fight it, Toshua, just stop. We'll deal with this in jail. We'll get word to Wolf and we'll get it settled. Just stop or they'll kill you, and I can't help you if you're dead. You can't help Jason if you're dead. Jason, but the momentum had him. The rage. He didn't even know what he was angry about, just everything. Something in Toshua knew Ishmael was right, but he was moving anyway, and his knuckles hit something soft and someone folded. They came in a rush, bodies and hands in a truncheon. Something hit his side, and it punched the air out of him so completely it cut the legs out from under him. His knees hit the scree, and more people were on him. A hit on his shoulder, a hit on his back. White behind his eyes. Jason, I'm sorry. White pain that swallowed him whole. And then nothing.
Fantastic. What a way to follow up a cliffhanger, huh?
Another cliffhanger.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, that was great though. And I can definitely, I can hear your development as an author, but I can also hear, Mike's commentary, just being like, just dig into it with everything you've got, and like, don't. Yeah, it was like very concise.
The version that he had, Toshua didn't fight it, because I was like, but it's bad enough already. And he's like, no, make it worse. He fights it. It's like, okay, Mike, and he was so right. It's better.
I love it.
So the lesson to the story is trust Michael Fletcher.
Yeah,
but don't tell him that you trust him, or he'll tell you bad things.
Exactly. He'll tell you fuck you, but then he appreciates it deep down.
Yeah, exactly.
So when are you planning to release Legacy of Brick and Bone? How is everything coming together for that?
The release date that I've set now is April 25th.
Nice.
Next year, 2023, or this year, I guess, when this airs.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, there's a story behind that, and it's the short version is I have this book called The Given Day by Dennis Lahady, and it had a lot of influence on Brightwash, and I don't know that I noticed how much influence it had until I picked it up again and I'm reading through it again. It takes place in 1919 in Boston, about the Boston police strike, as well as, a molasses tanker explodes, and they're just chaos, like utter chaos in that city over the course of a year. And Dennis Lahady is done writing. He's going to release one last book. And he says that's pretty well the end for the foreseeable future. And that book comes out April 25th, 2023. So it felt like okay, well, I need a deadline, so I'm gonna piggyback on, because there's no way our audiences overlap anyway.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's not like I have to share the spotlight with him. So it's just one thing that I don't know. I'm a big sap, and I do
Meaningful stuff.
yeah, stuff like that, and then I'll tell everybody how meaningful it is. But so I get a new book that day, and everyone else gets a new book from me that day.
Awesome. Well, I'm very much looking forward to that. Also, if anyone wants to hear more from Krystle, she and I did a one-on-one interview for SFF Addicts last year, so you can check that out. I'll link to that
I think you
in the
made me
description.
cry.
And we talk a lot about Anthony Bourdain and other
Yeah,
stuff like that.
yes, we do.
Yeah. Shout out to Bourdain.
Yeah.
And then you can also hear Krystle on episode 7 of SFF Addicts talking food and fantasy, and episode 20 where she's talking self-publishing along with Michael R. Fletcher, Anthony Ryan, Ben Galley, and Jessica Moon, where they did a panel on traditional indie and self-publishing. So check that out if you got the time. I'll link to that all in the description below. And Krystle, if you could let everyone know where they can find you on social media.
Well, if Twitter still exists as of now, then I'm still going to be there. Just my name, @Krystle Matar. I'm also on Instagram, the same name. And I'm trying to do TikTok, but man, I'm really bad at it. So I might be there, I might not be. Who knows? Maybe I'll try harder when I have more books to show.
You got it. Just like show some whiskey, show some Brightwash. It's all good.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, cool. Well, Krystle, thank you so much. It was very good to see you again.
For
I appreciate
having
you
me.
taking the
It's
time.
always fantastic.